This is for the free thinkers, the curious beings that swim upstream, who see possibilities, not problems, that learn from the past, live by the present, and create the future. This is the I Love Ugly audio show.
Welcome to the I Love Ugly audio show. I'm Valentin Nozic, creative director and founder of I Love Ugly. On this episode, we sit down with New Zealand's youngest MP in Parliament, the Green politician Chlöe Swarbrick. We discuss why the education system failed her at high school, her previous struggles and successes as a business owner, and why she's not letting age hold her back from taking on the big guns in New Zealand politics. Enjoy. Chlöe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Yeah, no worries. So just to kick it off, you started your own fashion label, you showcased it at New Zealand Fashion Week, you started multiple businesses, you ran for mayor and became New Zealand's youngest MP since 1975, and now you've launched your own podcast, I believe.
True.
And you're an
We've
MP.
done your research.
MP for Greens Party.
Yeah.
You're only 24 years old. Mm-hmm. You're an absolute beast. Yeah.
Oh, thank
How
you.
How do you do it all? How did this
the
start?
best thing I've been described as. How did it all start? So first business that we started, I was 17 turning 18 with my partner at the time, so a really good friend of mine, Alex. And basically there was actually a lot of different things happening at that period in time. It was about 2012, and New Zealand was living in Auckland, actually going to University of Auckland, and every man at the University of Auckland was wearing Zespies, so just to get yourself in that frame of mind and provide you with some context. We were basically, Alex is a 6'3" dude, and we were going around, and I was like helping. He was from Taranaki, so he was keen to get into some new gears, and because he was quite tall, he just couldn't find anything that quite fit him or that he was really into. So we were just like two young kids. I'd saved up quite a bit of money from working in retail. My first job was selling phones and phone plans, so I'd saved up quite a bit of money there. And for some reason or another, as you do when you're 18 and precocious as all hell, we were like, this thing doesn't exist that we want, so let's try and create it. And it was just, we had all of these different friends, my two friends, Vincent and Bryson, who I'd known from intermediate school, who were both incredible artists, but trying to figure out whether they wanted to pursue art at uni or go into something that's quote unquote more practical so that they could earn a living per their parents' expectations. And we just saw it as this opportunity to create a platform and try new things and develop a space, particularly for all of our friends to flourish in their talents. So that was the thing with Lucid. And then off the back of that, we then started getting involved in, the Fashion Week thing is actually really funny. So we did show during Fashion Week. We didn't show at Fashion Week because it was $10,000 to be involved.
Yeah, I was going to ask,
so
how
we
did
were
you
like,
fund it?
We were like, actually, while all these fancy people are in town, we went to Langsford Gallery and somehow managed to convince them to let us hire the space for a discounted rate as two young kids.
How
as
much
you
did
do,
it
you
cost
just have so many conversations. We got it for a few $100, which was mean, and convinced, some soda and some beer companies to come on board and give us that sponsorship. And then we basically just did a fashion show pop-up in an art gallery, which was one of the coolest things that I'd done by that point in my life.
Sounds
and
dope.
we invited all these fancy people who were in town for it, so we kind of made it look like it was part of Fashion Week, as you do. You create your opportunities there. And then we got involved in What's Good, which was about creating a space in Auckland, which was a growing city for particularly young local creatives and people who were starting up brands or starting up their practice in art to showcase their stuff and to connect. That then turned into pop-up shops. And then off the back of pop-up shops, we ended up running a week-long thing at St Kevin's Arcade in K Road. And then I was like, let's take this to the next level and do a permanent space. That then morphed into Ollie with our friend Brian, who came on from All Press. He's Brian Anderson, rapper, shout out. Ollie was this thing where we had to figure out how we were going to pay the bills. So the idea morphed from being a art gallery into an art gallery coffee shop into an art gallery coffee shop and donut shop. And we thought that would be the holy unity to like bring folks in who didn't give a shit about art, but could, care about coffee or be interested in donuts and then engage in this space and try and build a community there. So that was kind of the chronology of it. And the Mayoralty thing just came out, I guess, of all of those different things and realizing that, all of this stuff is created from, the decisions that somewhere along the line have been made. Having had the experience of trying to start up these businesses and particularly get into like retail or hospo spaces and recognizing different regulations that were in place or whether there were grants or not grants and how difficult or where the opportunities are or where the opportunities aren't just made me realize more and more that it actually matters what happens in the politics of all of it. I was also actually working at Neck of the Woods, which is just on K Road as well at the time, as well as BFM, which is #1 alternative radio station in Auckland.
Wow.
And King's Arms was closing down because of poor planning laws. All these cheap apartment blocks were going up next to it.
Yeah, my friend's grandmother actually used to own that.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
And, all these sound complaints and all of a sudden this
institution... Which is exactly what's happened at Eden Park as well.
Yeah, but this institution that had existed for 4 decades for young local musicians to get a foot in the door, start building their base, was closing down because someone had made a really lame decision about how things were going to grow or not grow, and it had impeded that growth. So, I was just like, at the end of the day, what's the point of living in this city if the people who are making the decisions don't care about the culture? That was basically the impetus for running for the Mayoralty. And then I guess I just made enough noise and was annoying enough that I somehow ended up in Parliament.
Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of your opportunities and a lot of businesses which you started were eventuated from seeing a lack of what you wanted. It was
a frustration.
Frustration, and also there was a lot of problems which then presented a lot of solutions, and you were just like, you had the art gallery and you thought, bring in the coffee element and then bring in the donut element to bring in different mixed demographic. How did those, just going back to the businesses, because it's something that I'm personally very passionate about, and also our audience as well. How did they do? Did they succeed? Did they fail? From your point of view, obviously, I know your growth mindset, so every failure is actually a success.
An opportunity, totally.
Yeah, but how did they actually do?
So all of them, we didn't have business plans before we went into them, which is probably, the first mistake, particularly when you're going into a space. Well, we had loose business plans with some of them, but it was largely that our KPIs or our key performance indicators were about bringing people together and trying to create new opportunities and upskill people and create something that wasn't there. It was never necessarily about the profit, which meant that there was only really one company that we had that was profitable and paid us decently, and that was Tips. And that was an idea that originally started as we're going to do an artist consultancy and try and connect artists with different projects, but just recognizing where opportunities are, it basically turned into copywriting and website creation and all sorts of consulting on social media and otherwise. And that allowed us to supplement our more creative pursuits while we could find out how to make them sustainable. So there were definitely financial failures and definitely money lost at points in time, but I take all of that as massive learning opportunities, and I think that reflecting on all of it, it was far more value for money than a BCom ever could be.
100%. I try to tell that to people all the time. But
if you want to get a 25k student loan on a BCom, why not? Experiment or just try something, especially if you've got low overheads with something that you can start in your bedroom, because you guys started with t-shirts and hats and
I pretty much started in my bedroom. Did that for about 18 months before I took the leap, but that's how you start.
And the thing as well is that if you're not taking those risks and taking those leaps, of course, you can't fail, but you're never setting yourself up to succeed either.
100%. I'm a true believer that no matter, if you're pursuing something, there's always going to come a point in what in your journey where you're going to have to take a leap, which is risky, which gives you a gut check, which makes you nervous, gives you sleepless nights, but I think it's absolutely essential in order to grow to that next level.
I think that risk is a part of the human experience, 100%. Or it should be,
well,
because
how we
otherwise
did grow
we play
and evolve
it safe.
As human beings.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's the funny thing to me, just contrasting my experience in the business realm with, what happens in Parliament now. Parliament is one of the most risk-adverse environments that I've ever been in.
Yeah.
And I think that there's the wrong incentive structure for the folks who are in there, right? People aren't taking the leap to innovate or try new things because it's scary and you have to explain that.
Yeah.
And we operate in a soundbite media environment. So people don't want to have to do things that seem a little bit more complicated or different. Because when everybody's playing it safe, it's easy to play it safe.
Of course.
But the thing is I don't care about being in politics, so it's in a pretty good place.
But do you think the fact that you don't care about politics is what's going to make you successful in it?
I think
Because it's refreshing to actually have someone that goes against the grain, that actually voices their point of view, that doesn't just bend over because the rules have been like that for X amount of times. You're just basically playing your own game.
Well, this is what excites me about being an Aotearoa in New Zealand, right? Like you would have experienced it in business and you experience it in so many different fields, but it's particularly evident in politics. And one of the major privileges I have with my job is traveling all around the country and speaking to different pockets of communities, whether they're rural or urban. And we are such a small country that things can change so fast if people get on board with the idea. And I think that most New Zealanders are super pragmatic and they'll just be like, that's a good idea. So the thing is, most people call bullshit on politicians in this way and style that we do politics a long time ago. And that inauthenticity really shines through in a lot of ways. This mindset that certain politicians have of just we have to play it safe in order to, not push the boundaries so that we manage to keep the things that we have at the moment.
100%.
People are really sick of it, but also that's the flip side of it. I come from, in terms of my mates and stuff, tons of them are anarchists or just don't care about politics. They're like, who cares? But at the end of the day, by not caring, perversely you end up empowering the people who are making things a bit shit. So you need to realize that if you want things to change, either get up and do it yourself or participate in whatever way you want to, but participate somehow.
Have you heard that quote, the masses of man lead quiet lives of desperation? And I think what it means by that is a lot of people want the change and but they bitch about that it doesn't happen, yet they don't do anything.
Well, funnily enough, I did, so my BA is in philosophy, and that was a really weird, my dad was like, what are you doing? What's the job prospects in that? But I was like, I just really am interested in purpose and what the point of everything is. And one of the things that I studied was kind of theology and looking at different religions in the world. I'm agnostic myself, but something which always resonated with me is in Buddhism, the notion, and it sounds real depressing when you say it, but that life is suffering. And if you really dig into that, I think that it means that regardless of whatever you choose to do, things are going to be hard. So you can choose to do the thing that you hate and it earns you the living per your parents' expectations or whatever, but it's going to suck. Or you can choose to do the thing that is really scary, but that gives you purpose and meaning.
100%.
And the thing that I always rally against, right, because I'm asked to speak at all of these, because I'm the young person who on paper, sounds good or whatever, to speak at all these success kind of events. And I'm like, I always come up after these folks who go, if you find the thing that you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I have to go, that is absolute bullshit. If you find the thing that you love, you will never work harder than you've ever worked because it probably doesn't exist, probably doesn't pay very well.
100%.
You have to invent it from the ground up.
100%.
So it's that recognition that it's going to be scary and it's going to be hard, but it's going to be meaningful. And you will really live.
Yeah,
totally. It's going to be
feel
fulfilling.
energized. You'll probably live longer. But the whole time you were suffering. Isn't that quite interesting? The fact that you were suffering, yet you loved it. So it's what pulled you through the hard times, and you live longer, probably healthier life, healthier relationships. You're a positive example for the people around you.
You find yourself
Sounds
in
very
your
counterintuitive.
meaning.
Absolutely. I think meaning and purpose is such a powerful thing. But once again, we don't really get educated. It's almost like I'm a believer that everybody should pursue a journey in self-education, because I think things which we're talking about now are so powerful to individuals and communities and countries, yet not many people know about it. So I think it's so important that people like you actually do stick your neck out and actually, speak on the importance of this.
It's funny though, because I have to remind people, because I have a lot of people nowadays, like, I'm obviously real lucky to have fallen into all this stuff, but obviously put on the hard yards to
lucky.
be here. Yeah,
I
feel that. And I've also failed a lot to be here too.
Yeah.
But people come up to me and, they've seen me on TV or whatever, and there's like a certain element of projection, and it's like, you're going to solve all this stuff, you're great and you're amazing. And I'm just like, I'm just a person, and I've just been obviously fortunate, capitalized on fortune, but also capitalized on that failure and those risks. And at the end of the day, I want everyone to do that. Because if everyone was to do that, then the world and our politics would look entirely different.
Oh, definitely.
Entirely different.
Do you think it all comes down to even high school as like you're marked on A grade, B minus, A plus, or whatever?
Dude, I hated high school.
That's how you're classified, whether or not you're successful.
Totally.
And so it's almost like ingrained at you in you from an early age. So it's almost, if you do want to change, you have to do all this unwinding and rewiring of your own brain.
Oh, totally. I was kicked out of chemistry class at high school. I was really annoying, but I was arguing with my chemistry teacher because I'd obviously started doing my own research and being far more interested in like other books and design and stuff. And I was debating with her that everything that she was teaching us was falsifiable, which is actually a premise of science, that it's all falsifiable until, and she obviously didn't like that. But, that was the kind of thing that I wanted to engage in. And that should have been an opportunity to be like, okay, you can now go and, learn about this like philosophy or critical thinking or whatever, or design thinking. But instead it was, no, you're going out of the class. And, you fail that segment. Most people don't know, but I'm technically a high school dropout. And I went to a fancy school, so I had to sign forms saying I was dropping out. But I actually got excellence endorsed in level 2 and went to uni early, but my school didn't recognise it, and I had to do the whole thing myself and all the paperwork because they didn't want to recognise that was a pathway. But also it's really funny because I got only just scraped through with achieved in level 1 of NCEA.
Wow.
And that's because I was totally disengaged and it wasn't the space that I wanted to be in, and I finally had the motivation with level 2 because I was like, I'm out of here.
100%. It seems like a common thing though, even because my son's the same thing. He's very intelligent, very bright, inquisitive, but it's not
recognised by the traditional schooling
he's a
system,
square peg in a round hole. So for us, I'm actually not too worried about it. But the teacher's worried about it. But I kind of see the way he uses his brain in other ways, and I just know it's all around stimulation.
Well, this is the funny thing, right? Like my little brother is 12, so it's really sick because I'm now our education spokesperson, and there's a whole lot of stuff happening in the education. Like the future of work is a minefield. Nobody knows what's going to happen there. We've got AI. Things are changing in every single field, and it's quite scary to people who are prepping for a law. But even people who are prepping for a career in like accounting or law, 100%. Because junior lawyers are currently being replaced by this robot called Ross from IBM.
I've heard about it.
So it's really scary to a lot of people, and I think at the end of the day, actually what we need to be doing with the education system, instead of trying to create workers that are going to fill XYZ role, we need to create citizens, because when everything falls apart, you want people who can critically and creatively think and build something from scratch.
100%.
As opposed to, do the job that they've been taught to do since they were 5.
100%. So why do you think people are inherently like that and wired that way?
I don't think people are. You mean why are people creative?
No. Why are people? They are scared to innovate or just look at a problem with a completely different frame of mind.
I think that a lot of it comes down to culture, and it comes down to nurture more than anything. I don't think that people are necessarily wired to it. I don't think it's our nature, because our nature, if you look at it in terms of the evolution of the human race, has been to take risks because we've all survived by virtue of evolving. So, I mean, if you delve into culture by definition is a shared set of values, and that's really interesting. And for folks who are listening, like it's a shared set of values. So it's ultimately about what we as a society are aware of and what we value and what we place on a pedestal. It's all of those unconscious things that we end up doing because they're so normalized that we don't see them. So it's not necessarily associated to, although often is, like an ethnicity or a country or whatever. But I think what we value is, talking about the New Zealand context in particular, it's often bandied about that we have a tall poppy syndrome, those kinds of things. And when you really delve into that, that's that we value people sticking their head down. We value people who don't necessarily make a noise about succeeding. And I mean, I find it really interesting to look at that in the context of pop culture at the moment and the kind of loathing that we have for people like Kanye West, for example. All our faves are problematic, but like the prior to the Trump situation, when Kanye used to give all of his rants about, I'm going to be the best and I'm going to achieve these things, and here's my vision for Adidas and all this kind of stuff. I frothed it because the notion was that the guy was pushing boundaries and he believed in himself, but we don't value self-belief. And I think that's the problem. We don't give people the tools for that. We teach people to doubt themselves inherently, and we teach people that if they want to succeed, they have to do what everybody else does. So I think that's the problem. I think it's nurture, and I think it's the education that we provide.
Yeah, interesting. Just going back to philosophy, which philosophers, like which books or philosophers really resonated with you and kind of like, changed the way you did look at the world?
My favourite philosopher is actually a woman who wouldn't call herself a philosopher, which is quite funny. It's Hannah Arendt, and she came out of the critical theory kind of train, which came out of Germany, and it was a whole bunch of German Jews, so they obviously left Germany when Hitler came along. And they, so she ended up in New York and then later went to all of the trials for all of the Nazi generals. And she wrote this book called The Banality of Evil, and it's basically about how all people, I mean, this is, a real paraphrase of it and looking at the kind of themes of it, but all people are capable of all value sets, and all people are capable of great good or great evil. And the notion that we can be whatever in whatever context. So she, speaks to going to this trial and watching this guy who had committed these atrocities, and there had been, hundreds of thousands of people killed, and he just looked like a normal person, and it's difficult to think that someone could be so seemingly inherently evil but present like that. So kind of staring into the face of evil and recognizing that they're just a small person. That's kind of the stuff that really interests me is as human beings, the value sets that we're capable of and how those value sets manifest in our society, whether it is through things like communication or through art and books or design. And particularly, I mean, I sound like a massive nerd when I say it, but to bring that all back to how it plays out in modern cities and where people typically have more progressive, inclusive values. People are interacting with different types of people all the time. So a good example of that is public transport. Public transport is something that we don't think about in terms of culture, but you are, regardless of your social status or income, you're rubbing shoulders with people who think and look differently to you. So you become accustomed to that. And you then start to value or at least be exposed to that difference of ideas.
Interesting. Hitler says if you tell a lie loud enough and often enough, people will believe you. And that's
it's dangerous, man.
100% dangerous, and people don't actually realize that there probably is modern day Hitlers. There's a lot of wolf, what's the saying? Wolf wrapped up in sheep's clothing. It's just you got to be 100% aware of it.
That's the point about critical thinking. I think that's really important. Like if we had this is what I value in education. I was really lucky, I think, to have a few teachers who really drew it out of me and recognised that despite being a really annoying, disruptive kid in class, I could have potential in creative and critical thinking. And this is why I think teachers are like the most important people in the world in terms of the stuff that they do for our kids. But if we were to instead have schools that allowed kids to explore ideas and take risks and create projects and to fail, failure, if they were to fail and learn from those mistakes.
And be rewarded for it.
Yeah, totally. Then, I think society would be radically different.
It's interesting though as well. I'm still believe it. The parents are the greatest teachers to the children. So it's almost like, the teacher can influence, obviously, quite a lot, because obviously taking up a big chunk of a kid's day, but ultimately it's the parents as well.
My old man was my biggest teacher, and I think it's ultimately why I ended up, being so interested in society and philosophy and power dynamics and relationships and how we can change things, regardless of whether they're real small, like seemingly localized changes, or real massive. I often speak about this anecdote where I was writing a speech when I was like 12, and as only, a 9 or 12-year-old, however old I was, it was about the double standards with kids and adults, and how kids have bedtimes and adults don't have bedtimes, and kids get told what to eat and adults can eat pizza whenever, all that kind of stuff. And I created this 2-minute speech, and I was standing there giving it to my dad, and he goes, I can't remember what he said, but it was some kind of critique. And I was like, oh shit, I'll change everything about it. And he was like, hold up, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you have to understand that other people think differently to you. And if you ever want to bring people on board with your way of thinking or make them open to your ideas, then you have to recognize that and you have to engage with that. And that was like, that blew my mind as, a little kid. It's amazing set my tone.
But it's amazing how those small, those moments like that, they almost rewire those neuro pathways in your brain. So, when you do face a similar situation later on in life, the way you reacted in that moment, or what your father or whoever speaks to you or encourages you, or whatever, how that can actually change the way you think later on in life. And people actually don't realize that, as you are a blueprint of your environment and the way you were raised, your siblings, just the people closest to you, are the ones that actually molded you. So it's almost like you didn't, and even your thoughts, it's like people think like depression and whatnot, people think that that's them and that they're different, but actually you inherited those thoughts. So I'm not actually your thoughts. We've got a 2 million year old brain, and the things that we're afraid of now are very different from 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago, we were fearful for our life to go get water that a saber-toothed tiger was going to attack us. Now we're scared about missing a deadline, or not getting
whatever grade, or
definitely, or people not liking your Instagram posts. But it's just crazy, and
it's a different form of it.
It's a very different form, but they think that's them, but actually it's something which they've inherited. And it's just like really understanding it.
And that environment thing as well, because I've done a lot of research on mental health and drug abuse and addiction, because those are kind of portfolio areas, but they're also things that I'm deeply interested in. And particularly recognizing the links between the two in terms of substance dependency and mental ill health. Like, the opposite of mental ill health is obviously well-being, and if we look at it in terms of that frame, like, what facilitates great well-being? It's obviously eating all good, like getting enough sleep, enough exercise, seeing your family, having meaningful work, and feeling as though you belong and you understand who you are. So it's a sense of identity. The major drivers of mental ill health, and this is what all the research over the past decade has started to show, is that it's largely environmentally spurred in terms of, it's things like trauma, and it's things like poverty, which can be the major drivers of it. And this is where I think we have to recognize that we are social beings as well. And the really unfortunate thing about stuff like depression is that it drives you ever more to isolate yourself, which is the complete antithesis to something that'll help you.
100%.
Which is why, obviously, when you are feeling, check on your mates.
Of course. Yeah, it's almost an obligation. Because I don't. Have you ever suffered? Obviously, you've had experienced the blues and gone through tough times. But have you ever been in a deep hole of depression?
Yeah, man. I've been quite relatively open about the fact, because I think it's important, particularly for people who hold whatever social platform. I have a history of anxiety and depression. And anybody who has been through the ringer with mental ill health will know that those things aren't linear. So they still kind of creep up at times. And it's that getting to know yourself, I think, and understanding how you react in certain environments and certain situations, but figuring out what makes you work well. So I mean, for me, it's been recognizing that I'm a relatively introverted person. I really enjoy meaningful conversations with folks. So like, I love a one-on-one convo. We can go deep on stuff. I cannot have those 2-second politician type combos where it's like, how's the weather? Bouncing to this next person, you know? And I know that I need enough sleep. I know that I need exercise, and I build my life around that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Because if you are not living sustainably, then you can't do the things that you care about, or you will burn out. And I've had that experience as well before, you know. It's real funny when, particularly you're in the thick of stuff. Like I was finishing off my law degree because I did that after my BA, and I was running 3 businesses. And I think I was finishing my work with Neck of the Woods. It was before I even thought about the Mayoralty. And I was balancing all this stuff, and you know, I was working 7 days a week, and all of a sudden I got hit with acute appendicitis, and I was then in hospital for 7 days, and it was gnarly. Like I had stuff leaking out into my stomach. Yeah, I had 2 emergency surgeries. I couldn't eat for 5 days. It was awful. But I recognized that, you know, when you stop spinning the plates, the world doesn't stop. Yeah. And you do need to take that time out, because the world will continue regardless of whether you're... And I think we end up putting ourselves at the center of the universe far too much and not recognizing that we can lean on other people and we can delegate.
100%.
And you're never going to be able to grow anything unless you have a team.
Definitely. And it actually takes a lot of courage to do that as well.
Totally.
Because even from my experience as well, when I first started my business on top of Mountain Road, I was 23 at the time. I had a 2-year-old
I remember
daughter.
that. I live on Newton Road, so it's
cool.
right around the corner, man. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. And you know, that was obviously all exciting, and once the adrenaline wore off, it was all okay. You're in the real world now. You've got rent, you've got
staff,
staff, you know, you've got a daughter, you've got mouths to feed. And I just couldn't handle it, and I fell into a deep state of depression, and the only way I could handle it at the time was smoking marijuana, and then I had back problems for whatever reason, which I thought was an injury, but actually it was probably from diet or what have you. So then, you know, next minute I'm, you know, taking codeine to numb that, but it made me feel like zoned out.
Totally.
And then I just got to the point where I absolutely hit rock bottom, and I just told myself, I was like, there has to be a better way.
Totally.
Yeah, there has to be a better way, and then I just pursued this journey of self-help, and I got books, went to a naturopath, because immediately I went to the doctor and they prescribed me antidepressants, and it made me feel better, but I felt nothing. I felt like a zombie.
Totally.
And I was like, nah, this is not right. And then it just kind of triggered something in me to actually pursue this different journey. And what I really learnt is, you know, the most powerful antidepressant is within us. Like we were given that. It's just, you know, learning and understanding how to tap into that.
Totally.
So as you said before, sunshine, runs, nature, food, people, clean diet, get rid of all the poisons and toxins and alcohol, and immediately, you know, you start to get clarity and you start to see life in a completely different light.
Yeah.
And
it's funny though, because like society doesn't promote that stuff. Yeah. Again, if you're talking about, you know, what society does promote, it's like working yourself into the ground, like, you know, drinking when you're celebrating or when you're depressed, or when you've had a good day, when you've had a bad day, when you've had a normal day, all of those types of things. And I think instead, if we were to go, actually, it's real mean if you get 8 hours sleep. It's real mean
100%.
if you look after yourself and, you know, go for a run.
Yeah, just look at a tree, go in the bush. Honestly, nature therapy, people think it's just for tree huggers. I kid you not, it's the best thing. It's like one of my passions, which one of my best friends got me into it. And, you know, we'll go out in the Waitakaris and we'll find a spring, we'll do cold water immersion, which, you know, it just stimulates blood flow through your organs, and then you get
But it's time to think as well.
100%.
I don't think we're alone with our thoughts enough. Like, that's a major thing for me. It's funny talking about the like being out in nature thing. I was actually never really, but like I'm an urban kid, grew up around Auckland Central.
I was raised on a vineyard out west.
So. Oh, true. So
at the time I took it for granted. I always wanted to be in the city.
In the city, and I never really frothed the idea of going out into nature and like camping and stuff. I was like, ooh, that sounds really like difficult and a bit boring.
Weird, it doesn't work.
But now I really enjoy going out for tramps because it's a different form of inspiration as well, I think.
Yeah,
like
I agree.
Speaking to business in particular, one of the best things that I ever read when I was looking at how you innovate and evolve and change your way of thinking is that if you are consistently looking at the best in your field, then all you are ever destined to do is emulate and do the same things that everybody has ever done. You can iterate on that, but you are never going to create something new. If you're in fashion, you need to look at architecture, you need to look at music, you need to look at nature. And same with whatever you're into, you have to look at different forms of inspiration and how different people do their craft. Like look at cooking, something.
Well, that's why some, people that change industries are usually not from that industry. So you'll have architects coming into Nike and creating the most innovative shoe of all time, and collaborating with Michael Jordan, the greatest, arguably the greatest athlete. And, you've got people like, I don't know, forgive me if I'm wrong, maybe Picasso. I don't think Picasso was trained, or maybe he was actually, but you see where I'm getting at. Like you come in, you look at it differently, and then straight away you're like, that doesn't make sense, I'm gonna do it differently. When we began this business, we came in completely naive, had no business background, and people were designing 12 months ahead, and it's purely funded off wholesalers, so you're dependent on this person's business succeeding. That didn't make sense to us, so we started doing 12 collections. We brought down our cost of good. We didn't design 12 months. We designed as close as we could because men don't shop. Men don't buy coats in summer. I know a lot of in the women's fashion industry they do. Men don't. So really basic
But there's
thinking,
the thing, it's
practical.
understanding how, like if you don't understand how your consumer or the people who you're trying to relate to actually think, regardless of whatever industry you're in, you are destined to fail. So
definitely.
it's actually being close to the ground. And I think that's kind of having skin in the game, right?
Like
absolutely. That was one of the biggest realizations that I had in politics, is that if I just continued to stay around all of these people who were bred to be politicians and, in this very literal ivory tower supposedly ruling over and understanding the lives of people, how the hell are you ever going to make a meaningful decision?
Exactly.
You have to be out there. Totally. You have to be out there on the ground.
100%.
Actually, like hearing people's critique, like in your face.
Definitely.
But also, dealing with and tackling all of those really difficult situations that are otherwise just numbers on a page.
100%.
So, like when you're talking about things like homelessness, like we're always talking about stats and stuff. But I was like, actually, I'm going to go and talk to LifeWise, which is one of the 2 youth housing providers in Auckland.
I think Nick's one of the guys is part of this.
Oh, sick. They, and I was like, I want to volunteer for work with you guys for 3 hours every Monday. And I did that all of last year.
And that was to understand?
It was to understand, and it blew my mind. It's just all of the stuff which these people are making decisions about. And again, you can apply this to whatever sector you're in.
And they got no fucking idea.
If you don't have any experience on the ground, 100%. You're never going to get it.
Well, it's like you can do something and hope it's going to solve a problem, or you can figure out what the problem is and come up with a solution. Far easier, far more practical, far more effective.
Totally.
It's like, fuck, they don't teach you that at Harvard Business School.
No,
it's like,
no. Well, that's the irony of all of it, right? Like people who train to do their professions never look outside. Like a great example of it as well is like how mainstream economists could not predict the global financial crisis or the recession. They didn't see it coming. They're supposed to be experts. But these people who were seen as like whack jobs from outside of it, who are engaged in different industries, were like, things are a little bit like
things
sketchy.
Are too good to be true.
This
cleaner's got 10 houses in the boat. This doesn't make sense.
Totally. So it's just, how are you ever going to understand anything if you don't get out of your head every once in a while, and out of your industry, and out of your, and even out of your community? Like go talk to people who have a totally different life experience to you.
I agree. So what did you learn? What did you learn with dealing, just spending time with people that are homeless? Because they've always fascinated me as well. I just haven't had the courage to ask them. What did you learn?
I've been dealing mostly, working with mostly like young people who've been homeless. So it's
and is that, sorry to interrupt, but is that actually rising? I'm just noticing it more and more.
It's definitely becoming more visible. So the interesting thing, or rather the kind of depressing and scary thing, is that youth homelessness is often less visible because it doesn't happen on the streets. So people end up, there's a form of secondary homelessness where you sleep in your car or you sleep on a mate's couch. But then often younger people end up engaged with some people who manipulate them and take advantage of them and then take them in and, screw them over and all that kind of stuff. And then there's often substances involved.
What's an example of that?
So people end up, selling their bodies.
Oh, okay. So is that for women or both?
Both women and men,
Wow.
And I was speaking to, this younger woman who had been homeless since she was 14.
Wow.
She's now 20.
Wow.
And she had just been bouncing around between Auckland, Christchurch and Wellington.
Wow.
And just trying to, again, I think that, you know, for her, really getting into the nitty-gritty of it, she's just trying to do what all of us are trying to do in terms of find purpose and understand her life. But she's dealing with so much trauma
of course.
that she doesn't know how to navigate spaces. And obviously people are turned off by the appearance of her and the fact that she's on the street. Speaking to the kids who have, you know, gone through the whole process of like begging and stuff, for them it's the most demoralizing thing that you can do, because people ignore you. And that's one of the difficult things as a, you know, average person, for lack of a better term, you've got no idea.
That you're going to spend it on drugs or alcohol.
Oh, totally. But the thing is that sometimes they do, and that's because their life sucks.
Yeah, of course.
No one wants to be addicted to substances.
Exactly.
But,
and like, living in trauma scars you, and you become intoxicated, and you actually can't think
hard
clear.
out, and
so
then you end up down this, like, it just stuff spirals out of control.
Yeah.
So the thing for them that really helps is, you know, finding that empowerment in terms of, you know, people seeing them as other people again, and they find a purpose and a way to contribute. I think ultimately that's what all human beings want to do. We just want to contribute. So that contribution and that participation in broader society and finding their community is what like helps them turn their lives around. But it's really hard when you're so far down the spiral. That's the fascinating thing for people who,
sounds so counterintuitive.
Yeah, totally. But it's the thing for people who get caught up in like gangs and stuff as well, you know, and end up, you know, down a really dark path with regard to criminality. They find their purpose and their meaning in their community in that gang underground because they've been rejected by mainstream society. So I think that we overcook how we're going to solve all these problems because we don't understand them again, and we get fearful of them, and we get risk averse because no one wants to talk about how gang members are just people as well. You know, and that's the thing about politics. Like, it is so easy and straightforward for people to buy into fear and to manipulate that fear as opposed to try and delve into the complexity and the nuance, but also, ironically, the simplicity that is just living in society,
100%.
you know, and empathizing with other people's humanity.
And that's probably why a lot of problems don't get resolved because people are overcomplicate it. You know, whereas actually you can keep boiling it down. Boiling it down to the point where it's very straightforward. But have you, from your experience, have you seen any cases of people, you know, being on the streets and just they've got nothing to live for and they actually do turn themselves around?
There definitely are some cases of people, so this is more so in research, but it's also the case that, you know, so people end up at rock bottom, and I think this is also the case for certain people when it comes to mental health. You know, when you hit rock bottom and you have nothing left to lose, you can kind of, you know, the options are quite simple. And some people end up just going further and further down a rabbit hole of numbness, and other people try and find a foothold on meaning. And it gets really difficult to try and explain what it is that triggers people to get to that point. But it's going to sound like I'm kind of being real, I don't know, trying to name drop. But I was having a conversation with Nick Cave after his show in Auckland about a few weeks ago, and he has been quite open about his experience in the past with substance abuse. So I think it was heroin that he was addicted to.
That's right.
And he was saying that there was a certain point for him. You know, we romanticize particularly drug abuse and creativity. And we say that, you know, if people are taking these substances, and that's when they have their best work and stuff. But he found that he reached this point where he was isolating himself further and further from the people he loved and the things that he cared about, but also that it was getting boring. So he decided at a certain point that he had to quit because he was getting further and further into just being a man alone, and life wasn't meaningful anymore for him. So he then went completely cold turkey on all substances, including alcohol. And for him now, he thinks that he makes his best work. And that's the thing, because he has to go further than blowing your mind out to try and come up with a new experience. He actually has to talk to people and have new experiences.
Because on the flip side of a depression epidemic, I also feel that the new trend is to take better care of yourself and your mind. Obviously, it's not everywhere, but I do notice it a lot more. And, you know, people aren't afraid now to actually speak about success and how to get it and the tools and tactics which you need to learn in order to experience that as well. Do you agree with that?
I think that speaking to a whole raft of young people in particular who are really keen to find their version of success, whatever it is and whatever they do, and live a meaningful life. It is the case that we have far more resources than our parents ever did. Obviously, it's a double-edged sword in terms of the internet can just be something that you end up wasting your whole life on because it's filled with distractions and awful people.
And disconfirming evidence. You'll hear one thing here and the opposite over here.
Totally. And there's that deep polarization as well, right? That's something which I find really fascinating in the context of politics, is that all of those cognitive biases really come out to play on the internet, and that polarization because people are just looking, as like confirmation bias and rejection of things that don't fit with, the way that you think about the world. So you just end up clumping together with people who think alike. But again, that's not at all beneficial 100%. If you ever want to change things or change your life or change the world or whatever it is that you want to do. But I do think that there are a lot of resources out there for people, and as long as you do keep that critical and creative lens on things, and don't just get angry at the world, but actually try and figure out how you're going to change things if that's where you're at.
Totally.
Then you should be all good.
So how do you balance it? Because obviously you need to empathize with people that haven't hacked clocked life. But then at the same time,
I don't think anyone's clocked life.
But you know what I mean. People that just it hasn't worked out for them. Should I say? But then at the same time, you've got this growth mindset side of you, and you need to be around hungry, like-minded people in order for you to grow to the next level. Do you find that you have to be conscious of the balance, and sometimes you find yourself, since you're going in this direction, you start to find yourself thinking that way, or are you aware of that, or do you think about that type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely come across people who just end up very myopically set in the way that they see the world, and to them it is that they want to throw stones from their armchair. And that's one of the hardest things, I think, when you're actually dealing with these massive crises of humanity, like climate change or the homelessness or the refugee crisis or whatever it is. Because there's always people from all sides, even the people who are supposed to support you, who are going to critique the way that you're trying to do things. And the way that I try and look at it, because, I particularly deal with all these folks who, the classic adage is don't read the comments, but I do read the comments because I want to understand what people are thinking, even if it is those people who are on their armchairs who've never engaged with the, quote unquote, real world. But what I find really valuable is actually trying to read through what is often screeds of hate, because I'm a young woman on the internet. And you find that what I find valuable is that if there is a grain of truth in it, I'll try and take that out, as opposed to just the ad hominem baseless attacks. It's like if someone's saying that they've got a different approach or a different perspective, then I'll try and integrate that, and I'll try and think about whether there's any meaning to that, and then I'll approach people who think differently to me. One of my favourite things to do, particularly in in politics, because it is all about different forms of change that you can create, and particularly around the cannabis debate, for example. All of these people who think that they disagree with me, who are like, we got to save the children and stuff, I'm like, I want to save the children too. That's my point. I want to regulate this stuff because right now, they can get it from any tinny house they want, and those drug dealers are not checking ID.
100%.
And I have to go and have those conversations with people. I don't just want to be antagonistic, and that's kind of what we were talking about before, the camera started rolling and stuff. Is the notion that a lot of people get into this real competition mindset, and it's that they're against everybody. But ultimately, some of your best collaborators can be people who are on the complete opposite side, of things to you.
100%. How do you, when you read all the comments that are against you, how do you come in with a neutral frame of mind and to actually pluck out the goodness of it? Because that's a very, that's impressive. A lot of people can't do that.
I mean, there's definitely days that I can't. And that's the thing. You need to be, I guess, self-aware to a certain extent of that. And, speaking to self-help and stuff, I went through that period in my teenage years when I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing with my life. I feel really ground down. I don't understand the world, and I don't know how I'm ever going to do anything, and things are really dark. And I remember just, reading through a ton of things where one of the things that really stuck with me, I can't remember where it was, but it was the notion that you are not going to be good at some stuff, and that's okay, but just be self-aware enough to recognize that, and then to work with the people who are good at that stuff, but also build your strengths where you want to build them, and try new things to figure out where you aren't good at stuff, and that's the risk side of things too, right? I think people who are really unhappy with the way that their life is, if they were to pursue what they think is a passion, like I tried so many different things and I was bad at a lot of it, but then I found the things that I was good at.
Yeah, definitely.
And you fail and you lose out and things can break down, but ultimately what you've got at the end of the day, if you hit rock bottom, the only way to go is up.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing as well. People think that you can just stumble across your ultimate career or your ultimate partner, but actually you got to pursue it. You got to try a million.
And even when you're in that position, right? Like it's real funny how people go, if I just do this, then I'll have the perfect career. Or if I just do this, then I'll have the perfect partner. Like if you're in that career or you're in that relationship, shit's hard. You got to work at that.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not just like magic and life's over and the credits roll. I know that's how movies work, but that's not how real life works. So if you want to, you don't just get it and things are okay forever. You get it and you have to keep working at it. And if you want to remain a sense of happy or, have your well-being, you have to recognize that there are going to be bad times as well. And you have to be willing to take those experiences and learn from them.
And almost expect it.
Yeah, totally.
Because when it comes to you, you're like, okay, I've been anticipating this. I'm ready. Whereas a lot of people, definitely. Whereas a lot of people just react to it. And that's what,
And I think, again, that's one of the things that we kind of don't really teach or engage with in, mainstream society, for lack of a better term, is the notion that even good things are bad sometimes.
100%.
And that's important.
Sugar's good for the moment. Makes you feel like shit a couple hours after. How are you wired this way? Like, do you think you built this person, or do you think you're just naturally like this? Because you're very, you're ambitious, you're hungry, you're, obviously, I know you are scared of things, but you're not scared of fear. You kind of lean into it, which is that's a huge skill in itself.
I think I think it was a huge range of things. A huge range of things makes a person, and a huge range of experiences make people. I think in being conscious about, really choosing the people that I choose to spend time with. And I have a whole raft of friends from different professions. Like one of my best friends is a midwife, and I love her insight into what she does.
Yeah, midwives are amazing.
Yeah, totally. Like, and another one of my really good friends, my best friend Tom, is a filmmaker. So his perspective on things. It's real funny because he helped me a lot during the local government campaign, and after that we didn't speak for a few months because he was like, I don't ever want to see you again. Because again, it was this recognition that whilst things were really good and we could create like amazing things together, it just wasn't sustainable.
Yeah, of course.
So it's, I guess, stumbling through and failing at a whole bunch of things. Like I definitely, there are days when I'm not like this. And it's recognizing that on those days, maybe you just need a nap or you need to do another thing,
100%.
So yeah, I mean, I don't think that I'm a particularly special person by any means. I've failed a lot and I will continue to fail. And that's the thing, like don't ever put your heroes on a pedestal. Like when kids come up to me nowadays and are like, you are like, particularly on the politician thing, right? Like I have a lot of young people who go, what you do is really cool and I want to be a politician too. How do I be a politician? I'm like, why do you want to be a politician? Like for real, why do you want to be a politician? Is it because you think that like, you get social status or you get on TV or you get like money or whatever? And it's like, actually think about what you want to change. Because if you actually apply that mindset, then you can be a nurse, you can be a teacher, you can be an accountant, you can be a mental health worker, you can be a business worker, you can do whatever, but think about your purpose and think about what you actually want to change. Don't just do something because it looks or seems cool, because that's often a way to be really disappointed.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, it's like, you can have mentors and tell you, people tell you this, but unfortunately, some people just have to experience it to truly
I
learn
did.
it.
Yeah.
I'm exactly the same.
Yeah.
I had a lot of wise people telling me not to do a certain thing, and I did it, and I failed, and I was like, fuck, you're so right.
Dude, I'm so anti-authority. I'm like, I can't. I'm sorry, I'm not listening to anybody who's telling me not to do something. I will fuck it up myself.
Yeah, 100%. But sometimes you got that natural gut instinct, which you need to pursue, because then you prove to yourself that, you know, because if you didn't do it, you would have always wondered. And that's why I've always got this theory that, you know, if I'm going down a new path or I want a new venture, I fully take it to the line and I can peek over, you know, I can fully see what's going there before I make a decision. Because otherwise it's that whole thing of regret, and a year or 2 years or, you know, 30 years will go past and you'll wonder, what if I did that? What would have happened? But yeah, unfortunately, you know, for people that are ambitious, they do have to go all the way to the edge.
Yeah, and I think it's recognizing as well, hey, that like you can learn something from anyone.
Yeah.
Like anyone who has a different life experience from you, regardless of whether they're not seen as being put on the same. It's the same thing with getting really myopic about your industry and just going, well, I'm only going to look at the best people in this industry.
Yeah.
If you're only, you know, talking to people who are the best of whatever field, and you're not talking to the folks who are actually consuming whatever you're producing or, you know, the service or whatever you're doing, then you are ultimately going to lose because you are not going to be able to move or shift or evolve.
Definitely.
And you know, society is not just made up of the supposed upper echelon; it's made up of everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Running for mayor of Auckland at 23 years old, like.
I was 22 at the time.
22 years old.
And the reason that I enrolled real late because I'd just turned 22 and I didn't want to be 21 running for the Auckland mayor because I thought my age would be a focus to begin with. And it was real funny because I never thought that my age was that much of a big deal.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
it's because you've got, you know, you're so focused.
Well, dude, like and the whole point of running for the mayoralty to begin with wasn't to like win. The notion of winning was to get people to give a shit.
Yeah.
And to get people to take ownership of the fact that all of us live in this city and things can be better if we just participate and if we just recognize that power.
But did you feel that your age was a disadvantage, and do you feel that people didn't take you seriously because of it?
It's funny, it's definitely a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
So on the one side of things, I feel as though, like it's funny being in Parliament now, but I feel as though I had to consistently prove myself, whereas it's taken for granted that other people have more life experience. Like the life experience one really gets me because I consistently got told that I had no life experience. It was the biggest critique thrown at me. And I just at the end of the day had to go, what is life experience?
Yeah.
You know, by virtue of being 50 or 60 years old, you do not have more life experience just because you've lived more years. I know tons of people who are in their 50s or 60s who've done the same thing day in and day out for 30 years of their life. And, you know, what you learn from what life experience actually is exposure to novel situations. And that's why, you know, babies don't remember stuff because there's an overwhelming amount of novel experiences and you are learning from all of that. But if you've spent the same, like your time doing the same thing day in and day out for 30 odd years, you know, probably have some problematic ways of thinking about the world. But it's also the case that when new situations come along, you are not going to be able to adapt or develop or evolve. You are not going to be able to solve new problems. You know, what's the saying? Something along the lines of, if you know, do the thing that we've always done, we'll get the results that we've always got. So I just really had to throw that back in people's face and go, what is life experience? Like, what do you want here? Do you want the same thing we've always had?
How did they react to that?
They didn't like it. But there's the thing, right? Like, you just have to challenge people. Obviously, you have to do it in a polite and empathetic way. But you really have to, well, I mean, you don't necessarily have to. It's just the way that I approached it. Like, at the end of the day, what the hell's the point? What is the point if we're not striving to be better and solve all of these problems that we've created as a society? What is the point if you're not moving forward and developing?
But I also think that if everybody, you know, you'd probably argue with this differently, but if everybody, you know, felt like that, like, fuck it, I'm not going to work, I'm just going to pursue my dreams and do whatever else. There'd almost be no structure. You know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? So you almost need.
What's the structure developed? So, you know, what's it given us? I get it. I get it.
Well, it
I'm
almost
just
like it'll form a new
advocate.
structure, but it's just like, I guess my point is like, maybe everybody can't be like that. You know, maybe, you know, if you look at the animal kingdom, there is hierarchies and there's a leader and, you know, they have to, you know, they lead the way and then everyone follows a similar path. But do you think with like human beings, it's almost similar? Like you can't have, you know, there can't be too many of yous. It's just...
I mean, it's an interesting thought experiment, right? Because we've never been there. We don't know what society would look like. I definitely feel that as we get into you know, the next iteration of whatever is to come, because we have to be seriously thinking about the future of work and the fact that, you know, automation is going to take whatever % of jobs, and we're going to have to look at education differently, and we are going to have to recreate society, and we're going to have to figure out what kind of structure we do want to have. I fundamentally believe in democracy, and that sounds so nerdy to say, but I believe in people coming together to create solutions to stuff. And there are definitely going to be people who feel more confident to put their voices forward, but that doesn't always mean that they have the best solutions. You know, if we look at the way that politics has run for the past 30 or 40 years, that's definitely not led us down the perfect iteration of society.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's there for someone to break or bend all the rules. So
yeah, well, I mean, as with every given industry, you know, like one of the real buzzwords is, what do you call it, when people completely change an industry, when people break into it. Anyway, been at all of these, disruptors. And it's really funny looking at that in terms of, you know, whether it's electric cars or the internet and social media, or, you know, online shopping, or whatever, or, you know, the Uberization of everything. Everything can change, and everything is changing faster than it ever has. So if you have an idea, just test it out. You know, things have never been more ripe for that. But obviously understand that people come from different, you know, situations. Like some folks have families that they have to support, and that means that you have a slightly lesser tolerance for risk, but it doesn't mean that you should completely give up on risk altogether.
100%. I think it'll be the best example to your children to actually take that risk. Because and once again, you're going to struggle, but it's going to bring them more fulfillment. Therefore, you are a better role model. Just kind of switching it up a little bit, how do you keep your body and your brain fueled, like through say diet and exercise? Because I take it, you know, with the way you're driven, cognitively you need to be high performance non-stop. Obviously you said you're an introvert, but you know, we just gave you some bulletproof coffee.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Matt.
And I can see you're kind of kicking into second and third gear. But how do you have any
This is just when I'm hyped about stuff. I'm just like, let me tell you all my
great.
ideas.
I love the passion. But do you have any hacks like that you do, you know, morning rituals or anything that kind of primes you for the day?
No, funnily enough, I don't really. Like, I really tried to... Meditation is an interesting one. I definitely, for about a year of my life, it was a really important thing. And then running was really important for me. And then weightlifting was really important for me. I did Muay Thai for 2 years. I did karate for 7 years.
How old are you again?
I'm 24. Life
experience.
I know. Tell me about life experiences. I was like, do you want to see it on paper, mate? And that's the thing, right? Like all these people who are like 50 years old, it's like, show me the things. Anyway, show me the money. So I don't necessarily have any structure other than I know that I need to do some form of exercise and be outside once a day. And I actively kind of make sure that that's in my calendar. Because otherwise, and my calendar, you know, I'm stoked. I've got a staff member now in Parliament, and so that's another person who now is able to help me with the screeds and particularly comms that I get on a daily basis, which I've never had support for before ever in my life. Obviously, it's on a whole different level now, but that means that, you know, people recognise that that is my time and that is really critical, and I'm not going to be able to do my job unless I have that. So the time that I do it completely changes, but it's important that it's there. I am really big on sleep, although there's definitely obviously times that I will have to wake up at 4 a.m. to get down to Christchurch or Queenstown or whatever, and I just recognise that I will have to catch up on that sleep at some point.
So you typically trying to get 8 hours sleep in a day?
I did a whole bunch of research on sleep back in the day because I really wanted to do, I can't remember what it's called, there's the Uberman sleep cycle. Potentially heard about it. It's one of those life hacks that I read up on Reddit.
Oh, carry on, explain.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
So you get 2 hours of sleep a day by sleeping, I think it's either 15 minutes or half an hour every
rhythms.
2 hours.
Yeah,
circadian rhythms, yeah. And I did it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I was a zombie afterwards. And I totally, all of the Reddit forums said to just keep going, but I was like, this is just not going to work with my lifestyle. I had lectures at the time, and I was, people are trying to call you at certain times to get urgent things. And it was just a matter of going, this is not going to fit with my lifestyle.
Definitely.
So I've tried all of these different ways of doing things, and I've failed at them, and I've been really gutted by that. But, you just keep pushing forward. I really love float tanks. I don't manage to do them enough, but being completely switched off.
I agree.
And then tramping is a new one.
How many times have you done the sensory deprivation chamber?
Sensory, the float tank.
Float tank.
Yeah,
that's
so
technical
term. All the Joe Rogan podcasters. I did it a ton during the election.
Yeah.
I did it at least once a week.
Yeah, wow. Because I'd say that's probably equivalent to around 40 hours of meditation.
Yeah.
I think.
And
you feel the
blows
effects.
your mind.
Yeah, you feel the effects 2 weeks, 3 weeks afterwards. You're a lot calmer. You're more articulate, clearer thoughts. Elevated mood. That's.
Yeah, I try and I haven't done one this side of 2019. But I'm definitely, and I also go to the physio.
Yeah.
That's a big thing for me.
Awesome.
Because when you're exercising, and I get physio massages and, get certain things aligned and checked out, because I sometimes have real trouble sleeping.
Yeah.
And that's more to do with, it's real funny, my partner calls me a vampire because I sleep without a pillow.
Yeah.
Because I just sleep straight flat on my back.
Wow.
And I don't know, it's just how I've ended up like growing and being like, this is how I sleep. And just recognizing that that's your thing,
Yeah. 100%.
I don't necessarily have any of those like mad 4 a.m. wake up, spend half an hour writing and then meditating and all those crazy things that folks do. I do need coffee in the morning though.
Yeah. But in saying that, you've noticed you've seen the effects of just being out in nature and walking your body, moving your body. I think it's like, so simple yet so disregarded.
Yeah.
Like I try to encourage all these guys to have a break in the afternoon, go for a walk. I often do it, and I come back and I'm just on, the blood circulating.
Totally.
But going back to the float tanks, I think they're amazing.
Yeah.
I tried them about 4 or 5 years ago. And then I just got addicted. I actually brought every single staff member at the time a voucher.
Awesome.
And everyone thought this was like hocus pocus. No one used it. So all of a sudden I had 25 vouchers. So I pretty much went every week, every second week for a year. And I was very zen that year. And then
it's that thing, it's recognizing what you need and trying it out.
100%, definitely. But at the same time, you can't always live in a state of bliss.
Nah.
You need that turmoil in order to grow. Just like growing a muscle, it needs to rip and shred and feel painful in order to grow and get strong. What about diet?
Yeah, diet's an interesting one. So I have been a vegetarian for nearly 10 years.
Yeah.
And the reason that I'm a vegetarian, I'm not a preachy vegetarian by any means, but the reason I'm a vegetarian was when I was 14 and at school and was interested in philosophy, I started reading about utilitarianism and the notion of, if something doesn't have to suffer in order for you to live, then cool.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. I always get asked by people who are like, ooh, if you were on a desert island, yes, I would kill the chicken.
So
that's because at that point it is utilitarian to kill the chicken.
Of course.
So I have been really bad with my diet in the past, and it's probably the part of my well-being that I struggle with the most. Sleep is pretty good for me, exercise is good for me, but diet is the one that is really difficult for me because I can go all day and get to 10 o'clock at night and realize I haven't eaten properly.
Wow. Yeah.
But that's because I do coffees.
Get your new assistant to book it in.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Tim did start doing that. So there was this recognition that I was having all these meetings from, 7:30 in the morning all the way, because Parliament sits till 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Wow.
Having all of these meetings and, speaking in the House or whatever, and I didn't take a break to eat.
Yeah, interesting.
So I have, it's been a big thing that a lot of people in my life have started picking up on. And I've got a lot of people who now bring me food or actively check that. And that's the community side of things, right? It's been really, really important for me having those people who check in on me and make sure that I'm doing all good, because it'd be but it's also the case that I recognize now that you don't get the best out of, for example, exercise if you're not eating properly.
Oh, 100%. I think, you know, if you exercise religiously every day, do everything right, but you eat shit, it's almost going to cancel out the gains that you've
I mean, most, you know, I got real deep on, I've spent a lot of time on the internet. I got real deep on like the bodybuilding forums back in the day when I was interested in weightlifting. And, you know, the notion that that diet is like 90% of like being fit. You know, you can do all of the weights and you can like be going, but you're just not going to gain the muscle that you need to.
100%. But that's almost like a lot of diseases are self-inflicted from foods. A lot of people don't, or they're not going to tell you that because it's going to make
Someone's
them less
going to make money. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Whereas like, you know, what you put in your mouth is, you know, it's one of the most important things. But yeah, in terms of content, because you're you're a smart woman. Yeah.
Thanks, mate. I'll take it.
you got a few big words up your sleeve, and when you were talking to me, I was like,
I used to read the dictionary when I was a kid.
Does it mean that? But you must consume, or do you consume content, podcasts, books? Are you regular? On the regular?
I try and read. I didn't read any fiction last year until the holidays, so I had the biggest holiday that I've ever had my whole adult life. I had 3 weeks off. And it blew my mind how much more energy I had and how ready I was to go back to work.
And just the way you're like, shit, this is living. This is what it feels like to be me.
Totally, because if you'd asked me middle of last year, everyone always goes, what do you want to do after politics? And I was like, I just want to do nothing for a year. But I definitely, but I definitely came around to the idea that actually you just need to build in those breaks, because otherwise you can't be reaching your creative or collaborative potential and stuff. So it's that recognition of sustainability again. And Julianne Genter, who's one of our MPs, is really, really awesome on this. She's another person who checks in on me eating properly. She always goes, like, if you want to be performing at your best level, like, look at the All Blacks. Like, they are not playing their, like, premier game 365 days
100%.
A year. They are preparing, you know, however many weeks or months and training for that and making sure that they're getting rest. And then they do the gig.
Definitely.
And then they rest.
Definitely.
You know?
Well, there's a such thing as overtraining, which is actually worse than undertraining.
Yeah, and also the overperforming as well. If you are consistently trying to do the jazz hands, like, you are never going to find the time to get better as well. Sharpen
your thoughts, you know, crystallize your mind. I 100% agree. What else is there? I think, we've gone on. This was an interesting conversation.
Yeah, sorry, I can ramble for a very long time.
We went deep. But so obviously you said once you're done with politics, how long are you going to stick in it, and what are you going to do afterwards?
It's funny, like, I don't know.
Yeah. And do you think you're going to, are you going to get to the point where, you know, you've seen the change, you feel you've achieved your goals, you know, what does that look like? And at what point do you say, I'm done, I'm going to change, I'm going to go to bigger and better things?
So I had a lot of people when I first started running for Parliament, because obviously, you know, I was lucky to, like, get the profile off the back of the mayoralty, which was never the intention of it. It was just to try and get people to care. But they were all like, oh, you know, do you want to be Prime Minister? How long do you want to do it? I was like, okay, first and foremost, you don't join the Greens if you want to be Prime Minister. You join the Greens because, like, you believe in something and you will fight tooth and nail for it. But, you know, I also didn't want to have to wait 10 years to have an opinion. I didn't want to have to wait, you know, and climb up the hierarchy and be so institutionalized that I didn't know what I thought anymore when 100%. I was allowed to speak freely.
100%.
So I wanted the opportunity to be able to say these things and to push back on stuff and to, you know, protest inside the institution and to create stuff from the get-go, because otherwise it wouldn't be worth it for me. But then I came into it and I was like, actually, what do I really, really want to do here? And people kept asking me about time limits, and I kept trying to throw out arbitrary times, like maybe 6 years, maybe 9 years, I've got no idea. And I just realized that that was the worst way to be looking at it. And instead I had to go, to do this genuinely and authentically, I have to figure out what I'm going to die in a ditch over. So for me, that was sensible drug law reform, because no one else was willing to do it, because it's too risky, it's complex and it's hard, and it sounds like you're siding with druggies. And I mean, obviously, I'm siding with people, and I want people to live healthy lives and us to understand and educate ourselves as to why that happens to folks. But yeah, no one else was willing to stick their neck out and do it. And I was just like, I am actually happy if I end my career on this issue. So for me, it was about recognizing that I had to have the issues that I was willing to actually, become deeply unpopular over because it would be the right thing to do for me.
You must have been popular with young people, though.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, there's definitely young people who are on the other side of politics. And I think that's another important thing, Like, I get a lot of, particularly like the boomers when they interview me go, oh yeah, so all the young people love marijuana. And I'm like, hold up.
Really?
Like, there's a lot of people who've seen the harm of these substances. But it's also the case that no demographic is homogenous. Like, no group of people think the same. Not all young people think the same. Not all middle-aged people think the same. Not all old people think the same. So that difference of opinion is really critical. And I want to foster that difference of opinion within younger people. Like, if you're talking about voting demographics, millennials actually now outnumber boomers, but we're far less inclined to vote and to participate. And again, what we were talking about before, the camera started rolling, it is the case that so many people don't engage in politics until they have something to protect. But why wouldn't you engage in politics to create something? Politics is legit just about decision making, and it's about the environment that we all live in and the ingredients to capitalize on or to push people down and elevate certain voices and whatever. So yeah, I mean, that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah. Do you think in terms of getting a point across, you almost have to look at it as a psychographic as opposed to a demographic? So there needs to be a commonality between an opinion as opposed to putting people in age brackets. And do you think it can be a key?
Geographic brackets, any form of
any bracket
like that.
It has to be psychographic, because in that way people share common opinions and they can be
and values.
100%.
Totally.
They can be from all walks of life. It's
I think that it absolutely is the case. I mean, it's definitely that. Certain people have, by virtue of where they live or what age they are or what school they went to or what they've been exposed to throughout their life, whether that's their income bracket or whatever, they are definitely, more susceptible or more inclined to be thinking perhaps certain things. But I think that, I genuinely come from the perspective that everybody is capable of every value set. And that gives me so much hope, because it means that we are all capable of doing whatever.
Whatever the fuck we want.
But human beings are amazing, and the brain is amazing.
So underutilized.
Yeah, but all of these problems that we have in society, if we actually just applied ourselves and stopped being so scared, we would solve them.
I couldn't agree more. What's anyone that I know we've kind of touched on this throughout the whole conversation, but kind of boiling it down to 2 sentences. Someone wants to do something, you've got a great idea, it's all lined up, but they're just lacking that last bit of push to kind of pursue it. What would you tell this person if they were sitting in front of you like I am now?
I would ask them what's the worst that could happen. Seriously. I mean, at the end of the day, there's 2 questions. Can things get worse? And can things get better?
And is it going to kill you? And
it's
probably
totally.
not, unless you're planning to, do jump out of an airplane with no
don't
parachute.
do that, kids. Don't do that.
Don't
do that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But it's like, what's the point? What's your point?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I really find it ultimately boils down to that. Can things get worse or can things get better? And is life going to be richer for it? Are you going to learn something?
Super wise. And then why just kind of, I know I keep wanting to close this off, but thoughts and questions keep popping up. Why do you have to go through politics to actually make a change? We're blessed now. We're doing a podcast. We've got a platform of 500,000 people that are hungry for this stuff. Whereas now you have to go, through politics, you have to go through hoops. You have to convince this person. You have to get the vote. You've started the podcast. You can be guests on other people's podcasts. The internet, it's free essentially. The only thing is your time. Do you think you could get far more reach and greater reach and resonate with the psychographic which you are intending to through that as opposed to doing it the other way?
I mean, it's the same thing that I was talking about before when kids go, I want to be in politics. I'm like, why do you want to be in politics? It was just the case that I was in a situation where post-mayoralty, when I tried to give things a shake-up, post-mayoralty bid, when I tried to give things a shake-up and have people question what they were doing and have them understand that, you know, the decisions that they made or neglected to be involved in inform the environment that we all lived in. I was presented with the opportunity to do this and I pursued it. Obviously, it wasn't just like, do you want to be a politician? I was like, I will see what can come of this. And I invested a year of my life in the election campaign and somehow fell down the rabbit hole and ended up an MP. But I don't want to do this forever. I definitely don't want to do it forever.
I hope not.
But I see that there is value that I can add to the conversation by being somebody who's not super institutionalized. And I hope that I can open doors to more folks who haven't been born and bred to be politicians to become politicians, because I think that there is far too much risk aversion in the way that those decisions are made. You know, if you think about it at the end of the day, you know, all of us as a society are participating in the social contract, and the most common and obvious touch points of the social contract in modern society are things like taxation and laws. And, you know, if you think about different ways that you can facilitate change in terms of two spheres, one of them is structural. Structural touch points are things like legislation, regulation, funding, taxation, subsidies, all that kind of stuff. The other side is cultural. Culture, by definition, is a shared set of values. It's about awareness, and different touch points for that are education, media, community building, business, localization, all of that kind of stuff. You can change things through all of those different means. And what I find fascinating about having been engaged in and like being in Parliament now for about 18 odd months is that nowhere near enough politicians are willing to meaningfully engage on the cultural side of things, because that is where we create an environment that's conducive to changing the structure. Far too many of them are just comfortable with, you know, middling along and never really changing anything, and, you know, just maintaining a career. And I kind of call bullshit on that. Like, again, what's the point?
100%.
So for me, politics is just a platform that I'm, you know, super privileged to have right now, and I'm going to do my best to change things in the way that I can, and to learn, and to hopefully take on board some constructive critique.
And if you can conquer that playground, you can almost do anything.
Yeah, it's a funny one, man. I hope that just, you know, we all get to contribute in some way or another to, you know, the world that our kids end up inheriting. And I just hope that, you know, we create a world where kids get to grow up and see their potential.
Awesome. Any famous last words?
Just
we
what
probably,
are we all
we
doing,
probably
mate?
haven't said enough words, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
We've got another hour. Thank you everybody for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and found any type of value, please subscribe to our podcast, share with your friends, and give us a 5-star review on iTunes to be in the draw to win a $200 I Love Ugly gift voucher. We will be drawing a winner weekly. Good luck, and see you on the next episode.